John Fredericks Radio Network. All right, joining us now, Alfredo Ortiz from
Good morning,
Job Creators
Alfredo.
Network. Alfredo, the president and CEO of the Job Creators Network. Alfredo, great to have you. We're live in Sunland Park, New Mexico, at the southern border of the United States.
Well, thank you, and good morning, gentlemen. How are you?
Great.
Good, Alfredo. We're going to get Kira to turn you up a little bit. Listen, one of the things that we just had Scott Rasmussen on, Alfredo, and he found new polling numbers just came out that said that U.S. workers, that people now believe that illegal immigration depresses or forces down wages for American workers. This is really the first time that this polling number has been over 50%, which means people are starting to realize the reality of this.
Yeah, I mean, I think, John, I think that's something that's been true for a while. I think the word is getting out. You know, people kind of scratch their heads, the Democrats in particular, why the Hispanic numbers are looking so good, actually, for Donald Trump. And part of that is because they know that through tighter border security, you're going to have less wage depression because of the onslaught of illegal immigration, which is really depressing their wages in their own communities.
What, as you talk to your friends in the Hispanic community, Alfredo Ortiz, and we look at this whole immigration issue and the illegals coming in, and 20 Democrats standing up a month ago saying they want to give health insurance to people that are here illegally. They want to get rid of all border security, get rid of the fact that even coming over is illegal. When you talk to your associates in the Hispanic community, what do they make of this?
Well, look, I mean, I think they understand that, really there is a breaking point on the southern border, right? And that if you look at the facilities, they're overcrowded, again, because of lack of action, not from the president, but lack of action from Congress for years, for decades, really, on immigration. And, that the border agents really are truly overwhelmed. I mean, up to 50% of their resources, as you know, John, on this, are really being used to support this humanitarian mission and crisis at the border. So they know that something needs to be done. And they do appreciate tighter border security because, like I said, a lot of the seepage, not only of illegal immigration, but when you look at the drugs and the cartels that are coming through with human trafficking and drug trafficking, well, guess where this seepage stops? It stops in Hispanic communities. That's where they come in and they start terrorizing their own communities. So I think overall, when you look at the Hispanic communities, the immigrant communities, they actually appreciate the fact that there is a president that's stopping that crime wave from hitting their own communities. And that's something that, again, I think, John, you remember this. I mentioned this to you. I'm part of the Latinos for Trump group. And one of the things that I predict, and this is my own personal prediction, is that because of this understanding of what's happening in the communities as Hispanics, and Hispanics are going to, in turn, I think, respond favorably. I think we're going to get a number that's well above what President Trump got in the last round of election.
For the Hispanic vote specifically, Alfredo.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. I think he got about 28% last time. My own personal prediction is that he should be able to probably come into the high 30s, is my guess.
I mean, if he does that, he's likely to win re-election, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I think the Hispanic community is going to be the one story that's going to be written on a lot come that Wednesday morning.
I agree with you on that. We are on the John Fredericks Radio Network, live at the border today in Sunland Park, New Mexico, right outside of El Paso with Alfredo Ortiz. And I want to thank our sponsors for making this possible. The Job Creators Network. Thank you. Go to jobcreatorsnetwork.com. American Jobs Alliance, my founding sponsor of the John Fredericks Show, FAIR, Federation for American Immigration Reform, of which will be at their radio row in a couple weeks,
day, yeah.
Colonel Mike in September. Nick Freitas for Delegate, former Green Beret, spent a lot of time at the border, knows what's going on. And
I want to ask Alfredo something.
And Steve Bannon, Citizens for the American Republic. Let's get to Colonel Mike. You've got a question for Alfredo.
Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Colonel.
Yes, I look at Facebook a lot, and I notice there's many posts of Latinas, plural, ladies, for Trump, and it's a big organization, and I see there's lots of posts just Latinas, male also, Latin people for Trump, and it's big. It's bigger than what I expected and thought. Just a couple of weeks ago, I looked at the numbers, and there's so many other Hispanic people in America that take your post and this group's post and they repost and repost. So tell me a little bit more about the organization.
Well, when you look overall in terms of what any of these groups, quite frankly, that are in support of Trump, especially with Latinos and Latinas, here's what they really care about. Yes, they care about immigration, right? We all care about immigration for reasons we've already talked about. But here's what they're looking for: 6 million jobs, right, that have been created since the president's been elected. Over 1 million of those new manufacturing jobs, engineering, construction jobs, right? Record low unemployment rates for every single demographic group. We know that overall it's a 3.7%, the lowest in 50 years, but it's also the lowest for Hispanics, right? GDP growth continues to boom at over 3%. And this is really why, Hispanics are so favorable right now for Donald Trump, because he is addressing jobs across the board, whether it's, entry-level blue-collar jobs or higher-level jobs. These jobs are being addressed, and bringing in skill sets and skills training, right, to be able to, continue to advance your careers. I mean, these are the kinds of things that are of interest to the Hispanic community: jobs, education, the economy, very much to what things that are important to you. They're not this, just one-size-fits-all kind of group that the Democrats like trying to fit them in, that, hey, these are all supportive of, Democratic policies and stuff like that. Look, Hispanics, especially if you think about those that fled communist and socialist countries, that fled Nicaragua, that fleeing any of these other types of, socialist countries down in Latin America, they don't want that reproduced here in this country. And this is what the Democrats just don't understand. They fled that. Why would they ever want to flee to a country that's starting to build that up, that whole socialist regime and socialist policies that the far left progressives are really trying to take the Democratic Party to? They don't want that. That's why they want Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm. Yesterday you had an op-ed that I want to talk a little bit about. Alfredo Ortiz. We're with Alfredo Ortiz, President, CEO of the Job Creators Network, the #1 organization for small business owners and entrepreneurs in the United States. Go to jobcreatorsnetwork.com. Alfredo, you said keep the economic boom booming, and you're part of the now President Trump jawboning network, trying to get Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell to lower interest rates. We were first talking about not raising them again. Now you're talking about lowering them. And Jerome Powell voicing that maybe he would consider that because he was concerned about the tariff war with China, which then gives Jerome Powell an out for doing it because he doesn't want to do it. Elaborate on your op-ed and why you think it's a good thing right now for the Fed to lower rates.
Yeah, John. Well, as you recall this, cutting interest rates, we believe would really help correct the Fed's disastrous December rate increase, which, if you recall on your show, I warned against, right, in which the Fed essentially admitted that it was a mistake soon after in order to calm markets. They knew it was a mistake then. He knows it's a mistake now. They need to correct that. If you think about that, Obama era, going back to those years, they had record low interest rates then. But the problem was that you combine those with higher taxes and more regulation. So all that ended up really happening was that we essentially funded, and produced economic stagnation. Now, right, when you have the kind of economic policies that Donald Trump and the administration has put forth, which is really focused on lower taxes and less regulation, less red tape, now if you can combine that with the lower interest rates from the Fed, we can continue to stimulate the economy and small businesses continue to hire and grow like they have in the past. When you have high interest rates, it essentially acts as a tax, John, on the economy, which, when you think about making loans necessary to start a new business, right, opening a new product line or expanding into new markets, right, it makes all of that more costly, especially for our small businesses. And 2/3 of new job growth is in the hands of these small businesses. 30 million of them out there in this country, employing about 60 million people. That's 90 million people that are dependent on Jerome Powell right now getting this cut right.
So let me just ask you, though, the original reason that he wanted to do some of these increases is because he said, look, we have to stop quantitative easing. That is not a permanent solution, right? And you have to get interest rates a little back up to market equilibrium. And I thought he did that. And he said, you can only do that when the economy is growing. Janet Yellen couldn't do it when we had, 0 or 1% growth. So that made sense to me. But now you want to lower them again. Okay, I get it. Combine that, Alfredo, with the president's budget plan that he says he's going to sign, raising the debt another $4 trillion over a 10-year period. At what point does this thing just hit the point of no return? Artificially lower interest rates, debt at $25 trillion. Everybody knows there's some number. We don't know what the number is, but there's some number where you hit the danger zone. Just walk us through that.
Yeah, John, you raise a valuable question, because I think one of the concerns is a lot of these crazy ideas that the Democrats are proposing on the left, whether it's the Green New Deal costing $51 trillion, whether it's Medicare for all, another $32 trillion. There's this growing belief amongst the Democrats, actually, that there is no worry and no need to worry about debt and deficits, right? So that you can keep financing for all intended purposes, all these social programs. Now you compare and contrast with what I call true investments in growth. We're seeing what happens right now when you invest in an economy in policies that actually grow the economy, not just subsidize, folks in terms of, their abilities not to find jobs. I mean, again, when we think about the total number of jobs, over 6 million jobs being created, we almost have over 2 million unfilled jobs right now versus the people that can fill them. I mean, these are the kinds of policies that can stimulate the economy. And so we want to make these investments. So, for example, the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, we know had an impact, but will soon pay itself off in terms of the deficit. But what we have to be careful for is all these other programs that are being proposed, and this belief that the socialists have that debt and deficits don't matter. We all know that they matter, and it will come a point where I believe, John, we're going to have to be calling for some kind of debt to GDP ratio amendment ultimately. And I think that's something that, our small business owners was important, because rising interest rates will crowd out borrowing, which will prevent folks from reinvesting back in their businesses and hiring more people and paying more on the jobs for their workers. So this is something that we are going to have to keep our eyes on. Right now, like I said, the bill that was signed, is going forward. It seems like necessary, but we do have to at one point start calling this out, John. And I think the only way to do it ultimately is through a debt to GDP ratio amendment.
I love that. You're one of the few people that I've heard mention that, just a debt to GDP, and that's, you're never going to get a balanced budget amendment. You can't run the country that way with a $25 trillion debt, so you can forget that. But I love your idea. You get somebody to propose a percentage debt to GDP. So GDP raises, the debt can go up, GDP goes down, you have to cut spending. I mean, that's what any business does, right? When revenue goes down, you cut spending. It's no different than any state government that has to balance their budget or anything else, Alfredo. So, okay, Alfredo Ortiz, what you're saying is, for small business owners, what you want now is you want a reduction you want a 1/4 point reduction in the Federal Reserve interest rate, and you feel if you do that, that is going to continue to spur this economy on. We're going to continue to get job and wage growth. That is going to start to grow us out, get more revenues in as the pie gets bigger, to bring the debt down, get Trump a second term, and then you're going to have to look at some serious ways to stop this out of control spending. Is that a fair summation of what you've just outlined?
Yeah, I think that's right, John. I mean, we know that if we can get these interest rates down and we keep the economy booming the way it is, right, if we can maintain that 2.5% to 4% range consistently, which can be done. I mean, when you look at other countries out there, when you do look at China, I mean, China had incredible double-digit growth rates. There's no reason why we can't be sustained at above 3% if we continue to maintain, the lower interest rates and the strong economy through, less regulations, less red tape, and lower taxes. We can continue to stimulate this economy. I mean, that's one of the most important things I think that we can do right now. And, the world knows that. The world knows that we can do this. that we can remain at that target. But we do need the interest rate cut to that point where we can continue to have this booming economy.
Alfredo Ortiz, you're right, and you did come on my show many months back, and you railed against the increase that Jerome Powell did. You said it would have a negative effect, and it did. At that time, you were in favor of just holding interest rates. Now you want a reduction, and the president, too, he's jawboning on that. Sounds like Powell is going to go ahead and do that.
It's fixing what he did in December, right? He should have never taken that rate increase.
Right. So what you're saying, it's not really a reduction. It's just going back to where we were.
That's right. That's correct.
All right. Your thoughts on Jerome Powell overall?
Look, I mean, it's one of those things, right? You wouldn't want that job, and you do want the job. It's a great position, but it's a tough balancing act. I gave him credit for even just taking the job on, right? But he's got to be able to. He claims he doesn't play politics, but I keep asserting that the more he claims that he's not playing politics, the more he's playing politics. I think the only fundamental reason, quite frankly, that he did take that rate increase was because he wanted to prove to the world that he wasn't playing politics and that he wasn't going to cave to the wishes of President Trump. When in reality, he should have said, look, the numbers just don't make sense. The numbers don't add up. There was no reason to take that rate increase, and he should have been done.
I agree with you. You're right.
I just hope he stops playing politics.
You're right. I think looking back at it, there's an argument to say that he took the increase just to prove that he wasn't going to be controlled by President Trump. But you got to go back to the Reagan days. In 1980, Reagan got in. The first thing he did, put Paul Volcker in charge of the Fed because they were on the same page. And I'm not sure when the president named Jerome Powell, I'm not sure that they were on the same page. And look, these are the learning things that this president, look, he doesn't make the same mistake twice, but let's hope he follows through on that. Alfredo, what is your Twitter handle?
Actually, the best thing to do is if you could take folks over to jobcreatorsnetwork.com. That would be fantastic.
All right, go to jobcreatorsnetwork.com. Jobcreatorsnetwork.com. We're going to tweet out Alfredo's op-ed you just heard about today. Alfredo Ortiz, the president and CEO of the Job Creators Network, the #1 organization fighting for small businesses and entrepreneurs every day. And also, as Alfredo said, this rate reduction by Jerome Powell and the Fed's getting back to December, it's going to affect 90 million small business owners. It's a big number, Alfredo. Thanks for being with us. Have a good weekend.